You were there for all of it. Your first steps, your first words, the first time you saw your mother's face and understood, somewhere deep, that this was safety. You lived through thousands of days packed with more discovery than any other stretch of your life, and you remember almost none of it. Think about that. The most important years you will ever live are the ones you cannot access. Ask yourself for your earliest memory, and you'll probably land somewhere around age 3 or 4. A flash of a birthday, a dog, a staircase. Everything before that is gone, sealed behind a door you have never once managed to open. We call this childhood forgetting normal. We barely question it. But the real answer is far stranger than a simple blank space in your past. Because your infant brain was not empty. It was on fire. In your first years, you were learning faster than you ever will again. You cracked the code of an entire language without a single lesson. You learned that objects still exist when they leave the room. You learned faces, voices, the difference between kindness and threat. You were, by any measure, a genius. So why does none of it survive? The man who first named this puzzle was Sigmund Freud, more than a century ago. He called it infantile amnesia. Freud believed you buried those early memories because they were too charged, too tangled with desire and fear, and your mind hid them from you on purpose. It was a dramatic idea. It was also almost entirely wrong. The truth turned out to be less about hiding and more about the way a brand new brain is built. Here is the first clue. The forgetting is not random. Most adults draw a blank before the age of 3.5. That number is remarkably consistent across the world. It was mapped carefully by a psychologist named Carol Peterson, who spent years asking children and adults for their very first memory. She found something almost architectural. There is a wall. On one side, memories exist. On the other, nothing. And the wall sits at roughly the same place for nearly everyone. But she found something else too. Something that changes the whole picture. When Peterson asked young children about their earliest memories, they had them. A 4-year-old could describe things that happened when they were 2. The memories were there. The children were holding them. And then, a few years later, when the same children were asked again, those very memories were gone. They had not been repressed. They had simply dissolved, quietly, without anyone noticing they were fading. So the memories are not locked away in a vault. They were formed, and then they were lost. Which raises a harder question. What could erase a memory that was already made? To answer that, you have to look at the part of your brain responsible for weaving experiences into lasting memory. It is a small, curved structure buried deep in your head, shaped a little like a seahorse. It is called the hippocampus, and it is the reason you can remember your life at all. Every story you carry about yourself passed through it first. And in your infancy, the hippocampus was still under construction. This is where the work of neuroscientist Paul Franklin becomes almost unsettling. Franklin studied a process called neurogenesis. That word simply means the birth of new brain cells. For most of your adult life, your brain makes new neurons slowly, carefully. But in infancy, it does it at a furious pace. Your baby hippocampus was flooding itself with fresh neurons, day after day, wiring and rewiring at a speed you will never see again. You would think that more brain cells would mean more memory. The opposite is true. Franklin's experiments suggested something strange. When a young brain packs new neurons into the hippocampus, those new cells don't just add capacity. They shove their way into circuits that already exist. They rewire the connections that were holding your memories in place. Imagine building a magnificent structure out of blocks, and then, every single night, someone pulls out half the blocks to build something newer and bigger on the same spot. The new thing is astonishing, but the old thing is gone. Your early memories were not stolen. They were overwritten by your own growth. Does that feel unfair? It should feel almost tragic. But your brain made a trade, and it was the right trade. In those years, learning how the world works mattered far more than remembering any single day inside it. You needed the pattern, not the snapshot. You needed to know that fire burns, not to recall the specific afternoon you learned it. And there is a second reason those memories slipped away, one that has nothing to do with brain cells at all. You had no words. Think about how you actually store a memory of your own life. You store it as a story. First this happened, then that, and it made you feel a certain way. That structure, that little narrative thread, is what lets a memory stick and be pulled back later. But as an infant, you did not yet have language. You had no words to hang the moment on. You experienced everything in raw sensation, color, and sound and feeling, with no story to bind it together. The psychologist Catherine Nelson showed how deeply this matters. She found that children begin building lasting autobiographical memories right around the time they learn to talk about the past with other people. When a parent asks, "What did you do today?" and the child answers, they are not just chatting. They are practicing how to turn an experience into a story. They are learning the shape a memory has to take to survive. So a memory needs language the way a seed needs soil. Without it, the moment happens, blazes bright, and vanishes. This is why your culture, your family, even your language may have quietly set the exact edge of your earliest memory. Researchers found that people raised in families that talk in rich, detailed stories tend to remember further back than those raised in quieter homes. The memory itself was never the whole equation. The words around it were. Now here comes the part that turns everything you just learned on its head. For a long time, scientists assumed the infant brain simply could not form real memories at all, that the machinery wasn't ready, that babies were, in a sense, not yet recording. But recent work has shattered that idea. A neuroscientist named Nick Turk-Brown led a study that did something once thought impossible. His team scanned the brains of awake infants while they looked at images, watching the hippocampus in real time, and the infant hippocampus lit up. It was encoding. It was making memories. Sit with what that means. The problem was never that you failed to record those years. You did record them. The camera was rolling the entire time. The recordings were made, stored, held for a while, and then lost or buried somewhere you can no longer reach. Your earliest self is not a blank tape. It is a locked archive, full of footage, with the key thrown away. And maybe not entirely thrown away, because those vanished years did not vanish without leaving anything behind. You cannot recall the day you first felt safe in someone's arms, but the sense of what safety feels like, the shape of trust, the reflex of who to reach for when you're afraid, all of that was laid down in exactly those unremembered years. Psychologists who study early attachment have shown it again and again. The template for how you love, how you handle fear, how you soothe yourself, was written before you could form a single memory you'd ever recall. So the memories are gone, but you are not free of them. You became them. Every time you flinch at a certain tone of voice without knowing why, every time a smell you can't place fills you with sudden comfort or dread, every time you feel at home somewhere you've never consciously been, that is your infant self speaking to you from behind the wall, not in pictures, in feeling. The researcher Patricia Bauer, who has spent decades studying how childhood memory fades, describes those early years as a foundation you can't see but are always standing on. You don't remember laying the bricks, you just live in the house. And this changes what forgetting even means. You have been taught to think memory is the true record of your life, and that whatever you can't recall is simply lost. But your earliest years prove the opposite. The most formative experiences of your entire existence left no memory at all, and yet they shaped you more completely than anything you can consciously recall from last week. You are, in the deepest sense, made of things you cannot remember. So the next time you strain to picture your earliest moment and hit that familiar wall, don't think of it as a failure. Think of it as proof. Proof that something enormous happened there. Proof that a mind was being built so fast it couldn't stop to keep the receipts. You were there for all of it. You always will be. Not as a memory you can summon, but as the person that forgotten child quietly, permanently became.